Welcome to Unlocking the Parenting Code, all about boys. I'm Kathy, and this season is dedicated to exploring the unique world of raising boys. Parenting boys today can feel like trying to crack a complicated code, a mystery, especially when it comes to understanding their inner emotional world. Together, we'll dive into real life stories, share practical tips, and uncover insights to help you and your son thrive, not just survive. So grab your coffee, settle in, and let's unlock the parenting code, one boy at a time. Welcome to Unlocking the Parenting Code, all about boys. Today, I'm excited to welcome Stacey Wallenstein. Stacey is the exuberant New York-based mom of three behind the Mint Chip Mama, a parenting, lifestyle, travel, beauty, and food blog bursting with family adventures in the New York area. She writes about fun things to do at home, cool places to travel, beauty products she loves, and delicious things to eat. The Mint Chip Mama has been featured in places like Psychology Today, Parents Magazine, Newsday, NBC Nightly News, and many more places, and nominated for the best blog on Long Island. Stacey, welcome to Unlocking the Parenting Code.
Thank you so much. I'm so happy to be here. Thank you.
So you have just a lot of positive energy and a wealth of experience. So I have never met a person who is kind of a professional blogger before. So if we can start there and just tell us a little bit about the Mint Chip Mama and what inspired you and how that's influenced you like as a parent or how it's connected with parenting.
Sure. So the Mint Chip Mama started 10 years ago. I can't believe it's been a decade. And when I was pregnant with my first child, I have three now. My daughter turned 15 yesterday. I was writing for a bunch of different outlets in Manhattan. And then when we moved out here a couple years later, when I had my second, who is my first boy, I really just wanted to launch my own place where I could write the thought pieces I was doing and the event pieces I was doing and the product reviews. There's so many different aspects of, or I guess back then as well, this was at the beginning really of like the whole mommy blogging movement. And there were so many different aspects of what one could write about that I wanted to kind of have a space where I could write about all of them. And so I launched the Mint Chip Mama. And if you can imagine, my favorite ice cream is mint chip. So that was a pretty easy name to pick. And really what I did when I picked the name was I wanted to pick something that represented me as a me and also me as a parent. So thus was born the Mint Chip Mama. And really, the blog has evolved with me and my family over the last 10 years. So, as I said, my daughter just turned 15. My middle guy is 11, and my little guy is 8. So, as their interests have evolved, so have mine. And then, as their interests have kind of waned on the whole toys and events thing, my interest has been allowed to shine of the stuff that was kind of what and who I was before I was a mom, like travel and beauty and food and all these things that I now either share with them or enjoy on my own when they are in 3 separate schools and 3 different time schedules.
Oh, wow.
Yes.
Wow.
Yes.
So it's okay. So basically you are a writer and that's how it all started?
So I actually never fancied myself a writer. I have 2 degrees in psychology and a background in business and finance. And it just is kind of funny how it all came about. I was just kind of like this chatty mom who was going to all these events, and I befriended all these writers, and they started asking me to write stuff for them. And then I was like, am I a writer? This is funny. And then my first, like the piece that I consider like my first like official writing piece, even though it wasn't my first writing piece, was when I was pregnant with my son and my daughter was like 3. And I was at an event talking to a friend who is an only child, and I'm an only child. She's my fellow only child. And we were having this whole conversation about growing up as only children and how I was really grappling with this concept that as an only child, I don't know how I'm going to raise siblings because it's such a foreign concept to me. So we kind of had this like really deep heart to heart while we were at this event. And I came home and I was telling my husband about this, and he's like, "You should write something about that." I'm like, "Right, what?" So I ended up writing something and pitching it to the Huffington Post, and it was picked up. And then it kind of blossomed from there. And I was so lucky that they let me write all these different thought pieces about being a young mom and what it was like even to move to the suburbs. And I wrote for them for a couple of years, which was really amazing. And yeah, and I guess somehow along the way I became a writer.
Wow.
But yeah, and my style is much more conversational, so it's not like I'm always grammatically correct. Not that I'm not grammatically correct, but I write very much how I speak, and even though that might not be the proper way to do it, that's the way that I want to do it. And the nice thing about having your own blog is you only have to satisfy yourself.
Exactly. Wow. Well, that's it's very, like I said, I've never met anybody that is doing that. So I find it quite interesting. So thank you for sharing
Oh,
that
my
with us.
pleasure. Yeah, of course.
So you've been a parent for 15 years, and that's a milestone in and of itself. I'm sure you've got a wealth of, experience and different situations that you've gone through. So looking back, what's something that you wish you had known when you first became a mom, or especially first became a mom of boys?
So I think that it's I guess my thought is, and every parent goes through this, that the famous saying that the days are long and the years are short. So I think about this nonstop. Like this, I feel like is my mantra, and I try to breathe through everything going on, realizing that it will be fleeting. And I think for anyone, no matter what the gender is of the child, when you have your first, you're thrown into the situation. There's no handbook. You have no idea what you're doing. If you're trying to breastfeed, that's a whole other set of learning that you don't know how to do. This thing that's just so incredibly natural is so difficult and hard. And, I always joke that people think that the angels are going to come down and hand you this baby and you're going to have this moment. And, the truth of the matter is, until you get it, it's really difficult. And some people don't want to do it. Some people move on, whatever. If you're committed to it, it's a roller coaster. And then I feel like once you finally get it, it's very gratifying. So, all of these things with my first child, I really, I don't want to say struggled through, but I think first mom struggled through in a sense that you're learning on the job, you're sleep deprived, you're hungry, you're tired, you're trying to think of anything in the world that you can eat with one hand. And then your second comes along and you're like, oh, I got this. And it's just so much easier. And then your third comes along and you're like, just get in the handbag, we got to go. And so I feel that with my first, I really didn't have time to enjoy a lot of things because I was trying to figure out how to do them. With my second, I definitely was able to enjoy them more. But then I also had this thing in the back of my mind where I was like, am I having two kids or three kids? Is this the last time I'm having a first step, or is this just the middle time I'm having a first step? And then with my third, I definitely had my sea legs. The training wheels were off, and I was like, this is the last time I'm ever going to see the first time. So I think just and the whole time that was happening, I was laughing at all these people that when I had my first newborn in the elevator and I was like sleep deprived and looking like a mess and my hair was all over the place and I hadn't brushed my teeth and they're like, it goes so fast, just enjoy it. And I'm like, I just want to brush my teeth. And and I couldn't enjoy it because it was so stressful. And I really just wish that I did. And I feel like there's this weird push pull between every day saying to myself, these things all go so quickly, enjoy the moment, and enjoying the moment. And then looking back and feeling like I don't know if I did enjoy the moment, even though in the moment I was trying to enjoy it.
Yeah.
I don't
Yeah.
know if that resonates with you, but I feel like I can't believe that my daughter turned 15. What? What?
It's really complicated. I like our son is 31.
Yeah,
And
that's
it's like,
double.
how did that happen? Like,
Yeah.
when did it happen?
Mhm.
Um, so yeah, it is true that, it goes by so quickly. And I think especially when parents can remember that in the tough times, because, along the road, no matter who you are, there are going to be tough times. And especially as a parent, it's really hard to know if you are like supporting your child to get through it in the right way or the healthiest way, or if you're hindering some of that because you're overstepping, or there are just so many
Yeah.
things that, you know, and it's like ours is an only child. So everything was a first.
Yep.
And because he was a boy and I wasn't that familiar with boys, it was like, is this right? Am I doing this right? Am I going to scar him for life? Like it was just, it's complicated. And I think the biggest complication is that we don't have enough knowledge and we don't have enough support.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's what really, parents need in general. Dads do too. They're just
Yeah.
not quite as vocal as maybe we are. But
Yeah. And it's
yeah.
funny that you say that because when I lived in Manhattan, so we had my daughter, we were living in Manhattan, and in Manhattan, there were I mean, this is at the time, this was in 2010, and there were all these different groups for pregnant women, for new moms. I was part of this incredible new moms group, and then I was part of like a proper new moms group, and then I was part of like a grassroots new mom group. To this day, some of those women are still my best friends. We celebrated our daughter's 15th birthdays together, both saying how are they 15 over and over, looking at pictures of them when they were 2. And I always say that the women that you meet in a new mom's group, especially as a first time mom, is a cohort that you can't even quantify how important that is, qualify. You can't, like, there's no way to explain how important that support is. And I felt that in Manhattan, at least the time when I had my daughter, there was kind of a lot of that going on. And I always explain that time as like, I feel that it was like freshman year of college where everyone was like open and wanting to meet each other and making new friends and making plans. And it was all like, oh, let's all chat with everyone and see kind of where we naturally go. And when I had my son, I'm sorry, when I had my second child, it was a little bit like I already have these friends. I'm already running with the older one. Now I just have this baby. I'm pushing the stroller. I got to get to nursery school. I got to do this. I got to do that. Oh, I should make friends with this lady at this class. But like, not that, I don't want to say pressure, but not that like desperate need to
Yeah.
to talk to someone that looked like they were going through exactly what you were going through. And also all of your friends that you had the first babies with have, if they have second babies, are having them at different paces. So they're all at different paces. And then we moved out to Long Island. And when I was pregnant with my third, I was like, are there any pregnant women around? Hello, hello. It was like crickets. It was crazy. And I think part of that is everyone drives in their car and goes home to their house. And in the city, you're walking and you see, oh, I see a lady with a stroller. I'm going to stop and say, that's a nice stroller. My stroller is like that too. But like when you're in and out of your car and you're going into your house, it's so like separated.
Yeah.
So I approached the JCC in my community and I said, like, why is there no parenting center? Why is there no new moms group? Why is there like no support for these new moms? And it's like a running joke because my daughter was in nursery school there at the time. And I became very friendly with the administration. And then eventually, a couple years later, when I had my third, after I had him, they were like, I saw an ad in the paper for it. And I called them and I said, I'm so happy that you're finally doing this. Who's running it? And they're like, oh, you are. And I was like, oh, well, that's something that would have been helpful if you told me in advance.
Mm.
So I launched this new I launched a parenting center with the main focus being this new mom series. And I mirrored it off of what we did in the city. And it was a 6-week new mom group. And it was just incredible because, at that point I was on my third kid. So I didn't really need that cohort. But these women that we brought together, I mean, and still to this day, I see them because it's my community. And they're always like, these are my best friends. Like, I don't know what I would have done without these women. And they tag me sometimes in like Halloween posts with all their kids who used to be these teeny tiny infants. And now they're like, third graders in, costumes and stuff. And it's just, I'm so grateful that I was able to experience that as a new mom. And then I'm so grateful that I was able to give that to like another generation of new moms.
I wonder sometime if it's easier or more difficult today. Like I believe strongly in the same thing. And even though I am somebody I'm always searching for answers. I'll listen to myself, trust myself, but I want to get as much information as I can and then decide what's going to work for me. So
Hmm. Hmm.
I remember all through the child rearing ages and stages here when we were still living in Japan, so up until the end of elementary for sure. Um, I had all this information, didn't have like the internet wasn't as big, in the beginning there. So that wasn't, there was no support from that part. But I had one friend who, her daughter was born 3 weeks after or before my son. She also was from Canada. She had married a Japanese man and she was living in Japan. So she was the one that
Yeah.
throughout his whole time, she was the one that when nothing in the books were, it was kind of like, okay, this is just not, I can't find the answer to this. I don't know am I doing something wrong? Like and then I would, be talking to her and she'd say, my daughter's doing the same thing. Like it was a developmental thing, not
Yes.
a gender thing. And
Yeah.
just having someone else to say, my kid's doing that too, it was kind of like this wave of relief. It's kind of, okay, this is the way it's supposed to go. There's a plan here.
Yep.
That was probably the most important thing in my parenting world at the time. So I
Yeah.
wonder today, is it like you had groups and like physical people that you connected with. I wonder what the difference is today for young moms who are in situations where they don't have that physical connection, but they can get that connection online. I wonder if it's enough.
So I think that's an interesting question. And I think, it's a broader question about like social media and is it real in the sense that does it make you feel like you have friends and are talking to people, or is it like speaking to people in space that you think are real, even if they're real behind?
Mm.
So I think it's interesting and I know in the pre-interview we were talking a little bit about like the evolution of smartphones and how in 2010 I didn't have a smartphone, right? So like I could text with people and I could email them, but like there wasn't really support that I was finding online, even though Facebook existed and Facebook groups existed. It was more like you would go home and go on your computer and go on these groups, and maybe you would do that at night or in the middle of the night or something. But it wasn't this in your hand, always there chatting with people all the
Mhm.
time. It was much more of that personal connection. But also for me, at least, I think a large part of that was just being in a walkable city and you know if I needed milk, I was walking out, with my daughter in a stroller. And if I was in a stroller, I'd see some other lady with a stroller and I'd start up a conversation. And I think it was so much more organic.
Yeah.
I think that people that look, a lot of people don't live in walkable city. And I think that those groups will provide, I'm a firm believer that everything happens for a reason and what people need to find they'll find and it'll happen when it needs to happen and all of that kind of stuff. So I think that if somebody is desperate to find a human connection, they'll find it, and it either will be enough or won't be enough, and they'll either know that or not know that, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
Completely.
and I think also there's a lot of social channels now that are used as search engines. So, like when I experienced a nursing strike with my son, I was out here already and I like lost it. It was a very difficult time for me. And I was searching, I learned through somehow that it was called a nursing strike and what one's supposed to do when a nursing strike occurs. And I remember like Googling and searching and looking and trying to find all the support in this one specific area. And I think if you have like a keyword you're looking for, you could definitely search and then find the answers and feel that that's support. But if I was in like a group of moms that were all dealing, like if there was a pop-up nursing strike support group, like that would have been incredible.
Yeah.
Um, and, I think that when a mom is trying to find the answers of something specific that can be done using the internet and using these groups and social media, when they're looking for like that support and just like needing someone to say, oh, this milestone, or oh my God, I'm so tired, or oh my God, all I want in life is just someone to fold this laundry. I think that's kind of just like one of those human connection things that's needed.
Yeah.
Um, but look, there are people that have babies in rural areas, and I'm sure of all the people that live in a rural area, not all of them are having babies, and you can only do the best that you can.
I think it's like anything. It's, there's pluses and minuses, and sometimes it depends how you use it and what you need it for.
Yeah,
I kind of like to talk a little bit about communication because
sure.
you've said a few things about, you want your kids to be able to always talk to you about anything. And communication was a huge, huge, in the forefront of things I did with our son, because I think that's the key. Your connection is either strengthened or weakened by the way you use communication. So, and in general, people often say that boys just aren't as expressive. They, usually don't share their feelings, and which that's a whole other thing, which I don't think is part of their nature. I think it's what the environment does to them. But how did you create, the foundation that they continue to want to speak with you? Like what strategies did you use as a parent?
So I'm laughing at this only because I've had situations with friends of mine who have sons in classes where my daughter is, and they'll call me and be like, I asked a question and they grunted, what happened? And I'll be like, here's 17 paragraphs that she said about what happened.
Yes.
So,
Yeah.
and it's funny because now with my boys, when I say like, how was school, I try to ask them, I don't want to say leading questions, but open-ended, structured questions, So I always say to them, so I guess taking a step back, I think in life with every human being, communication is important. And I think that it, number one, shows you're interested in them and shows that you're focusing on them and shows that they're important to you. And I think that it's kind of like it's like a flower, right? So you
Mhm.
put the effort in and it grows and it grows and it becomes something beautiful, and that's what a relationship with a child should be. So I try very hard to ask my kids specific questions every day, and not just like, how was school, what did you do, because the answer is always fine, nothing. So I'll say, what did you do at lunch today? And they usually say, ate lunch. And I go, okay, well, who sat to your left? Who sat to your right? And what did you talk about? And then that starts to kind of open it a little bit. And then I'll say, what did you do at recess? Who did you play with? Did you play a sport? Did you do this? If it was raining, was it indoor recess? What did you do at indoor recess? And I feel like, as they tell you these different pieces, you can then dive deeper and get a little bit more information. I definitely see a huge difference in this strategy with my daughter and my boys. Um, but I think also just um, getting to know the players in their day, learning the kids' names in their classes, learning their friends' names. So you could say, like, oh, and did, Joe have a funny shirt on today, like yesterday? And they could be like, no, but Susie did. Let me tell you about that. And I feel like what I find is you just kind of have to strike the right question, and then you'll get a lot of information. Very often I say, like, well, I hope you told the teacher that, because it's usually some crazy story. But yeah, I think it's just, getting them talking. And then as far as their interests go, kind of leaning into whatever they're interested in. We have a good friend whose mom was a gifted and talented teacher when she worked in a school. And she would always say to us when she was retired, like, whatever your kids are interested in, just be interested in it. So if they like dinosaurs, talk to them about dinosaurs. If they like trains, talk to them about trains. Like, don't try to steer them into something you think they should be interested in. They'll naturally gravitate towards something, and just lean into that. And so that's kind of, what I've always tried to do. And I just think, whatever they're into at the time, just kind of go into that. Like, my middle one is really into baseball. So I'll say, like, oh, do you want to go to a baseball game? Or, he'll go on and on about stats, and I'll look at him glazed and I'll be like, uh-huh, uh-huh. Oh, that's nice. But just letting them tell me what's important to them and then responding to that.
There's quite a lot written in some places, especially in helping boys to articulate things. And the same as what you mentioned, the key to most conversations is questions that you ask. So that's the part of, your talking, and then the ability to be able to stop talking so that they can have a chance to be heard. But I remember a couple of times there were certain questions that I thought, oh, that's brilliant because it just starts a conversation in a different way. There was one thing that I really liked, and this man, every at dinner, the dinner table every evening, he had three boys, and he asked each one of them, tell me one thing you did today that you're proud of, and then tell me one thing that happened that it took courage.
I like
So
that.
whatever it was, and I thought if that was one thing that parents could kind of hone in on is those questions. So,
Hmm.
but okay, so but when you were talking, I had this image of your three kids because you got a teenage daughter and then these two boys. And because usually a very quiet person and was from a big family, how do you manage at the dinner table? Because you said you've got a very verbal girl and
Hmm.
she's older. So,
Hmm.
how are you able to manage the conversation so that she doesn't kind of monopolize everything that's going on?
So usually, it's a funny question. So usually, so she, I feel like opens up about all that stuff, like kind of with me, not like at the dinner table so much. Usually, my middle one, who's 11, just talks and talks and talks and talks and talks and talks and talks incessantly. She's just telling him to shut up and being obnoxious, and my little one is just sitting there eating quietly.
Yeah.
But I think that they I also feel very strongly, and again, going back to that first article I was talking about writing about like having siblings, I feel like I've always tried to like make them like each other and spend time with each other and love each other. And I genuinely think that they do like each other. And it's funny. So my boys share a room, which is a very big point of contention with them. And they'll like, I mean, they're like as textbook brothers as you can get. They play with each other so nicely until one of them punches the other in the face for no reason. And then they fight and hate each other and scream and cry that they can't stand that they have to share a room. And then by the time it's bedtime, I listen at the door and they're chatting about their day. And it's like, I think that's like the most heartwarming thing. And I always think that, when I want to yell at them, I'm always be like, he's your best friend. And when you're sick and you're old and you have no friends, he's going to bring you soup. And they're like, what are you saying? I'm like, your brother will always bring you soup. Stop crying. Stop it. But, I think it's just that funny
Yeah.
way of making them understand that they're best friends. And at the dinner table, I think that having family dinner is something that we hold very, very strongly and important in my house. And obviously, with three kids, very active, not every night is that way because
Yeah.
everyone's going in a different direction. Um, but we definitely try to do that as often as we can. And I mean, when they were little, I used to have those cards that you would ask to,
Oh
you go
yeah.
around the table
Yeah.
as like prompt things. And then sometimes they were like really cheesy, and then we would just make fun of them, which was fun.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think, we go around the table, we talk about our day, we talk about what we're doing, we try to check in with each other, did you have a test today? How'd you do in the test today? I think it just kind of, again, like figuring out the questions that they're going to answer
Yeah.
instead of just getting like the canned fine, yeah, no, whatever.
Yeah.
I always say like, what's the hot goss in sixth grade? What's the hot goss in third grade? Just to get the boys
Mhm.
kind of laughing because that's just such a cringy mom thing to say. Um, and then my daughter usually will be quiet and then have like bursts of, oh my God, do you know what happened? And then everyone's like, shush.
Yeah. But that's I do. I think communication, that's kind of the glue of a family.
Yep.
That kind of whatever your connection is, it's going to reflect how effectively you can, as I'm not articulating, as you can communicate with each other.
Yeah. Yeah, and I
Um,
think it's important. And I think also two things I want to add. I think it's really important to spend alone time with each of my kids. And I think it's really important for my kids to each spend alone time with each other. So my little one, who's 8, he's like the sweetest thing on the face of the earth. He is like the kindest, most sweet, like he has like a heart of gold. And he is going through this phase right now where he's sad that he doesn't get to spend enough time with my daughter because she's 15 and wants to, be off with her friends and doing stuff. And he's sad that he was born before her, or that she was born before him, so he missed out on all those years of making memories with her, which is like the
oh
sweetest thing on the
wow,
face of the earth.
wow.
And he like loves her so much that like the two of us, she and I, sit and just like like kvel over how delicious he is. And like, he's so cute that he wants to have these like special times, just the two of them. And it's just like the sweetest thing on earth. And, you know, my middle one also like just wants to spend all this time with her, and like they knock on her door and want to like just sit with her and do homework together with her. And she's an incredible student. So she'll like tutor them or, you know, help them with stuff. And I
Wow.
think it's important. Yeah. So I think it's really important for them to each have their own relationships and special times. And I also feel really important, you know, feel that it's really important that I take each of them and like go do something or spend a little time alone with each of them, so they feel like, you know, they're the main character in,
Yeah.
you know, for an hour here and there.
Yeah, I agree. What about independence? Because you've said that's really important, and I would think that would be something that would really help each of the children, kind of empower them and build up their sense of self-esteem, and also as a team player in the family. When you have focused on independence, which you might want to share how you've done that, I don't know, but have you found any difference in how it was received, like as far as your daughter and how she, you know, was able to move in that direction, and for your two boys?
Yeah, I mean, I think that independence is incredibly important. And I think at each age and stage, it looks like something different.
Mhm.
So I've had my kids make their own lunches, which I think is a very small thing, but is very empowering, because I always say, you know, a kid can make a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. A kindergartner can do that. It's so simple. You can
Mhm.
help them, you could not help them. And then the deal has always been, if you make your own lunch, you could put a special treat in for yourself. And we have like a bucket of Halloween candy, and they'll take like one, you know,
Oh, nice.
Snickers or something, and think that's like the sneakiest thing in the world. But I think that it makes them feel really proud. And I think it, you know, I think there's part of, you know, I think that something as simple as making a sandwich can be, I'm choosing what I want to eat. Someone's not just making me something and having me eat it. I'm making it myself, so I feel like a big shot. And then I'm opening it and sitting there with my friends, knowing that I made this, that it's exactly what I want, and that there's a little treat in it because I'm like rewarded for being a big shot, you know? And so that I think is a really big deal. I mean, obviously, like they do their laundry, which is not an exciting one, but just kind of something that we feel that is something they can do, you know, once they're able to do that, they can do that. Those are like the simple in-house independent things. I think there are broader, you know, suburban independent things that we do that I always say to my kids, like, you have my trust until you don't. And I have very different children, where my daughter basically came out of the womb being a straight A overachiever. So I never had to look at her schoolwork. I've never had to ask if she had homework. I never needed to say study for a test. She's ahead of me. She's getting A's. She's doing great. She has had a lot of freedom. I don't want to say early, because I don't think it's been early, but I think that I'm much more giving to her with freedom. Also, she's older, and I think my 11-year-old doesn't understand always that forgetting the fact that she's a completely different person, she's older. And I think that he doesn't get that he can't do things that she does because he's younger than her.
Mhm.
I think that's a big point of contention. And also, he's not as responsible as her. He's not as mature as her. He's a boy with a young birthday. So he's not only not as mature as her, but he has like double strikes against him, making him less mature. Um, and like one of the things that we've let him start doing, and this has been something that he's earned by showing me that he is responsible, is we've started letting him ride his bike around the block by himself. This is wonderful for him, but also a point of contention equally, because he has many friends whose parents let them ride their bike free roam around our town. We live in like, I would say like a mid-level town, so it's not a small town. It's a biggish town. Like there are some main roads, you know, double yellow line, multiple lanes. So I'm not quite comfortable with him doing that, or my daughter for that matter, but there are many parents that are. And that's, I say, I don't judge them, but they're allowed to make the rules in their family, just like I'm allowed to make the rules in my family. And I think that's very problem. I mean, look, with any kid, with anything, if you say to them, you can't do it, if your friends can, that's a problem.
Yeah.
Um, So what we've been focusing on a lot lately is you can ride your bike around the block, and then his, loop got a little bit bigger, and then his loop was allowed to be multiple times. And, I walked him across the main road just because of my own nerves, not wanting him to ride his bike across the main road. And then, they now in the loop. So we live in a cul-de-sac, and across from us is a neighborhood that have a couple pocket parks. So a couple times my daughter and son have, taken their bikes and gone to one of the parks and had a catch or something like that. And I feel like they're baby steps. And as, I see that they're listening, then more happens. But then, if my 11-year-old is riding his bike in my court and starts doing tricks, and I say to him, "You're not allowed to do tricks," and he goes, "Okay," and then looks at me and does more tricks, I say to him, "You need to understand that if you're doing exactly what I'm telling you not to do in front of me, I don't trust you to go off and not be in front of me. Like, why would I think that you're not going to do that and crack your head open by flipping your bike over, riding it up a hill across the street when I can't see you if you're doing it in front of me?" And I think sometimes he doesn't quite get that. And, it took a long time to get to the part of him being able to ride his bike alone, because I would say to him, "If you're doing these things in front of me, I don't trust you to not do them not in front of me." And I think that is kind of a difficult thing to take in. Whereas my little one will be like, "Why is he doing that? He's going to crack his head open." And I'm like, "Thank you." Like, I get the validation from him.
So, Stacey, you're saying a couple of things, and I know I've heard it in like our pre-conversation as well, but and I wanted to bring it up because I think it's really, really difficult for parents, and I think maybe even more so today because of internet and social media, but to take a stand that's not popular. Whether
Mm-hmm.
it's that, all the others are doing this or all the others have this. And um, I think a lot of parents feel pressure to, go with the flow, to, what's the big deal? If 90% of the people are doing it, why shouldn't I? But knowing that they don't want to do that. But it's really like it takes a lot, like I've done it too, but it takes a lot to say, I don't think this is right for our child. This is the rule in our house. Sorry,
Mm-hmm.
that's it. So
Yeah.
where did you pull that from, and how is that kind of played out in your parenting?
So that is something that is ugh, an ongoing battle, exhausting, difficult, uh, terrible. I mean, every negative word I could use to associate with that. It is being the unpopular, difficult, last man standing, 12 angry men, every cliche you could imagine. We have not gotten our sixth grader a phone, which is a point of contention, which is a constant battle with him. um, Going along the lines of what I was saying before, when I say to him, "You can't do tricks on your bike," and then he does tricks on his bike in front of me. We've had situations with him where he has not been a responsible internet user, and then he wants a phone. And we say to him, like, "How can you do something you're not allowed to do and then expect us to give you more freedom under that umbrella?" And excuse me, obviously he doesn't like that. It's not a popular answer. And it would be so much easier just to hand him a phone and say, "Whatever, I can't do this anymore, I give up." But, I feel like I should have like embroidered on a pillow, like, "You'll thank us later," or every like canned parenting line that you could say. I always say to him, "All right, well, you know what? I know this is difficult. I know it's a problem, but you'll understand one day that we're doing this for you and that we want to make sure that you have an attention span and that you can have a conversation with an adult and that you read a book and all these things." And not to say that if he had a phone he wouldn't do them, but just having him sit and read a book is such a fight that if he had a phone we think he'd become a zombie on his phone. And I say to him, every cycle when this fight comes up, that even if you had a phone we would have so many restrictions on it, that I want you to understand that if we one day give it to you, which we will eventually, but it's not that one day we're just going to hand it to you and you have carte blanche, have fun, enjoy being, on every social media channel and Googling and having no controls. I said to him, you will in fact have no social media. You will have very strict controls. And when you're home and you don't need it, it will be like in a locked closet, not like carte blanche on your phone. And I think he sees his sister on her phone, and a big fight with him is, well, why did she get it, and why did she get it when she was my age, and why can she have it now? And the truth of the matter is, when she was his age was during COVID, and they were at home, and she was sitting in her room with the door closed, and her only social interactions were online because there was a global pandemic going on. And we begrudgingly got her a phone because that was the only way for her to communicate with people, except, playing with them outside. But once it became winter, what are you supposed to do? And I mean, that was a time that, God willing, we never have to experience again. And as a parent, I think you kind of did anything possible in your power to just make your child feel like they weren't isolated and sitting in their room and having no one to play with. Um, and I don't think that's an answer that satisfies him, but that's, to be honest, is the truth. It's also a matter of, she, again, has always been 10 times above whatever the level of responsible should be for her age. So I never was concerned. I had a million conversations with her. You're not going to be in a group text. You're not going to respond. Every time, somebody says something negative, imagine that everyone takes a screenshot and sends it directly to the person that it happened with. At that time, there was a lot of mom drama going on. And I would say to her, not with me, but I was a observer. And I would say, this mom said something about this mom, and then somehow the principal like found it or something. And she's like, how did that happen? I'm like, do not be in group text. And she's like, I don't want to be in group text. Like, people would add her to them. She'd take herself out, but she was very aware of the drama that could begin if you do something incorrect, with your friends or not with your friends on the internet. My son, on the other hand, at the beginning of the year, for example, was having a fight with us that he didn't have a phone. And then my daughter very nicely was like, if you want, you can use my phone for a little bit after school just to text with your friends so you're not left out, because that's a big part of it. And what does he do as his first act of having this phone? He goes into the bathroom and says to his friend, do you want to see my daddy's in the shower? And we're like, yes. We're like, well, here's a perfect example of you not being mature enough. Maybe this was last year, not this year. Right. But like, these examples keep coming up to show us that if he did have this instrument, what would he do? It's not like his first act was,
Yeah.
doing his homework on his phone. It was, and like, he has done things. And look, I don't think he's done anything at all that any other boy his age would not do.
Okay,
I just,
stop there for a
okay.
minute.
Okay. Was that too much of
Why
a
do
generalization? Sorry.
No, that was perfect. Because like I get exactly what you're talking about. But where do you think it comes from?
I think it comes from their prefrontal cortex not being developed and them being
Mhm.
11-year-old boys, and they should be playing in dirt and playing outside and kicking a ball and hitting a bat and not being on a device like a zombie. Thank
Mhm.
you. I will get off my soapbox. I think that, look, he's an 11-year-old boy. He should be riding his bike around. He should be playing with his friends. If he wanted to have a play date every single day or whatever they call it now, with, hanging out with their friends, playing basketball, playing in the backyard, doing this, doing that, great, 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 great. I don't think that we as grown adults understand the full volume of having this endless abyss of a device in front of us. But we understand that there's a time and place for it, and not to say that there aren't adults that don't misuse their
Mhm.
phones and the internet and that they're not completely addicted. And I think you're hard pressed to find even the best phone person not be addicted to it. I mean, if you
Yeah.
leave it in the other room, it's like phantom limb syndrome, right? And so I think that and I feel like I'm so old when I say things like this, but first of all, thank God they weren't around when we were younger. And I just can't imagine growing up with that. And I was talking to someone the other day who was saying that her daughter is so worried if she's out somewhere that someone's going to film her and embarrass her, that she like doesn't want to go places.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh my God, like, this is hindering these kids.
Yeah.
And what is it teaching? It's teaching these kids to chase after likes. It's teaching these kids to chase after views. He says, my son's like, oh, I got all my friends to follow you. And I'm like, they shouldn't be on these channels, but great, thanks. I'll take their likes. But, I think that there's this whole piece of childhood that's being stolen from these kids because they're staying inside and they're playing on these devices. And look, I grew up in the 80s. I had video games, I had Nintendo, I, had the distressed thumbs from playing on my controller so much. So it's not like I was outside, skipping all day long. But I feel like video games are the closest we can say my generation is to having some sort of electronic device. Not to say that video games today for boys isn't a whole different story to phones, but I think that the video games that we had when we were younger in the 80s, first of all, the graphics were like apples to guavas. You can't even compare them. And, you were out, the game ended, you died, and you started from the beginning. So there was this, it almost was like it taught you how to climb a hill,
Yeah.
how to like have endurance, how to push forward. Whereas now you die, but then you save it where you die, and then you just start back up there. And there's no like, I always joke with Super Mario Brothers. I used to have to start back at World 1-1 to beat the game, and I could like get through the whole game up to like 8-2 in 5 minutes, and then hit the last ones and win the game. And my kids are like, "Why didn't you just start at 8?" And I'm like, "Because you couldn't. You had to start at the beginning." And I was watching my son play, my little one play a video game this morning, and he was playing this Batman game on PlayStation. And I mean, the graphics were horrible. I'm horrible, meaning incredible. But he says to me, I wonder if Batman killed these guys or if he just like knocked them out. And I was like, what? And he like scans over and it's just like a pile of bodies. And I was like, you're 8. What are you doing? And I like, it's
Yeah.
it's crazy. And I think something like that, and there's so much violence that they're being exposed to this way. And I think I'm the last woman standing in my area who says like, all these violent things make them have violent behavior. And everyone's like, nah, that's not true anymore. And I'm like, it is. I'm yelling it is. But
There's quite a bit of thinking that technology definitely has a different pull for, girls and boys. And sometimes it's just, maybe it's the development of their brain, maybe it's the stage that they're in. I haven't read anything conclusive as to the reason, but it seems to be that, boys can get drawn in much deeper. And so then it makes it more difficult to, stop them or put limits on it. And
yeah.
not quite sure why. Sometimes I think too, like when you were saying, he's 11 years old and this is, what would be best for his development. Sometimes I think that expectations of people are based on their chronological age. So, you've got an 11-year-old girl and an 11-year-old boy, very, very different, but the expectation is the same. So then that little boy has to do something to keep himself in the same ballpark as the little girl. And usually it's not something positive, but it's something to get him ranking up there. So that with the expectations being, not possible. Like that's kind of when you said that your son had the phone and went in the bathroom and did that. That's kind of like, that's it. He's at an age, and especially if you've got a big child, like I've noticed that over the years, if even a 5-year-old, if you have a physically big, like tall, 5-year-old boy, people put higher expectations on him than if he was, a foot shorter. So it's, there's a lot of things that I think that are, kind of pitted against boys. And I think it takes a lot of stamina and courage for parents to say, I don't believe this is the best thing for you right now. We can look at it in another 6 months or, that kind of a situation. I wanted to ask you one thing because you seem to have, a fairly, lovely relationship with your family. Is there any one tradition or activity that is kind of like what you like? The reason I'm thinking that is that for us it was Yahtzee. We would go on camping trips and we would spend every evening having, tournaments, Yahtzee tournaments. And that went from when he was really young till we still do it. Like we still have Yahtzee tournaments. Was there a particular, activity or tradition that you guys do that, kind of binds you together?
So there's this one game called Rubik's Race that we really love.
Mhm.
And it's basically like a deconstructed Rubik's Cube, and you go head to head almost like Battleship. And then you have this little shaker thing that has, I guess, 9 squares, and you put it down and you say, ready, go. And then you have to move all the pieces on your side to match it. And then the first one that gets it, gets it. So that's a game that we play a lot. My daughter and I play Spit a lot, and I really like to kick her butt. And I want to say that publicly. No, just kidding. She recently learned poker and then taught it to us, and we've been playing that a lot, which has been really fun. um I know I said like I don't love nasty video games, but because of kind of what I do, I'm invited to a lot of different events and I'm given a lot of different really cool products to try. So there is this new gaming system that came out that is trying to push more like family play and exercise instead of like, violent games. So it's video games, but kind of like better video games, let's
Mhm.
say. And one of them is Fruit Ninja, which I'm told like, oh my God, mom, this has existed forever. But I guess it's always been on like a device so you like swipe or something, but this is like live action person Fruit Ninja, so you have to like chop all the fruit. And when I played it at the event, I was like, this is the most fun thing I've ever played. And then I'll play that with my kids. And we just like, it's a one-player game. So we just take turns and it is so much fun. And it's exercise, which is an added benefit. Um, we love like I love them, whatever, going on walks, going on hikes. Like during COVID, we hiked. I think I hiked everybody out, but now like I try to go for walks with them a lot. We go to the beach, like sometimes we'll go walk along the beach. Um, but I really feel like games, I mean, like you said, like games are so important. We have a couple that we like. I always get new ones. People send me new ones, and we're always like, can we figure out how to play it? Is it easy to understand? And is it fun? And we always joke that we have like, every time someone sends me something, we're like, is this complicated? There
Yeah,
are big games that people rate as like the best games ever, and then they send it to us, and we're like, what are we missing? We can't figure out how to play this.
yeah.
And then that kind of becomes fun. And then the other thing is like we really are big fans of like on Friday or Saturday night, like watching a movie together, and we have, a comfy couch downstairs. And I'm very old school, if you can't tell, and I still like to watch DVDs, and I get them out of the library,
Yeah.
and we sit and watch movies a lot. We have our favorites, so we will watch some favorite ones that sometimes are inappropriate, but are sometimes so funny that we let that go. Um, yeah, but like I feel like those are the games I'm trying to think. Like we try to play cards a lot.
Mhm.
And I always joke that like it's so incredible that in one deck of cards you have endless possibilities, and they're always like, "Oh, shut up." But it's just funny to think that like you could bring a deck of cards with you on vacation, and you could play a different game every night from one small compact deck of cards. But I think also part of the fun of it is like figuring out what you guys like to do together, and it might be different for each person.
Mhm.
But that I don't know why that Rubik's Race game is just one of our absolute favorites. And it's funny because Rubik's became a client of mine. And the first video I was like, can I do it about this one? And they're like, yes. And I'm like, oh, it's so exciting.
Well, it's nice that you can combine, that interest with a family
Yeah.
sport.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I think today too many families don't play enough games, and I think
Yeah.
that's something that is missing sometimes. Um,
Yeah.
Before we end, because I'm just
Mhm.
trying to be mindful of the time
Yes.
here, I always ask two questions just kind of for fun. And the first one is, what would be
Mhm.
the title for a movie about your family life? And then what would the movie summary or synopsis say?
The title would probably be Gravity Always Wins because I always say that to my kids. Um, that's a great question. I feel like, ah, God, I always joke like the Wonder Years growing up was such like a pivotal show in the life of people my generation, I want to say. And I always think of I always think of two scenes in everything. I always think of the last scene in the Wonder Years, and I always think of the third act of Our Town. And I think they're similar in the sense that in the Wonder Years, like the end scene, Kevin Arnold says that I look back, on my childhood with wonder or something like that. But just the whole concept of like, when you're in it, as a kid, it's just your childhood. You don't really get it. And I want my kids to grow up and look back thinking they had like a great childhood. Um, and then I always talk about the third act of Our Town, and I'm going to try hard not to cry. In that, like when I don't, are you familiar with the play?
No.
Okay, so Our Town by Thornton Wilder. It's like a play that's 100 plus years old, maybe, and it's three acts. And the third act is about, I'm not going to spoil it, but a third act is one of the characters going back to watch a day in her life or his life. And the concept is like, don't pick a milestone, pick a regular day, because then you'll learn once you're gonna cry, that by the end you realize how important every day is.
Yeah.
So I can't talk. I cannot talk about this without crying, no matter what. But just kind of that I want them to understand that like everything I do is for them. Oh, fellow Canadian, Brian
Mhm.
Adams, everything I do it for you.
Yeah. You
But
know,
I just,
I will tell you, Stacey, that like just having an older child, like there does come a point where they say, um, when their world gets bigger, when they say, I didn't realize how great our life was until I saw the lives of so many other people. Like to get that confirmation, it will come without any doubt. It will come. So, okay, last of these questions. So picture
yeah.
yourself sharing some wisdom with your child, anyone, as they are entering the world of parenting themselves. What words of wisdom would you share with them?
I think kind of what we were talking about, be interested in what they're saying and ask specific questions. I think that the best thing that you could give your child is like the knowledge that you are interested in them and love them and want to talk to them. I
Mm.
think that, and I don't want to keep bashing phones, but I think that it's so important to put your own phone down and to like be present with your children. I think be present in your own life, right? And I think that it's, everyone does the best. Every parent does the best that they can in the moment and does the best. You hope they make the best choice they can based on, like you said in the beginning, doing all the research and saying, based on all of my evidence, I think I should do X and not Y, and this is why. Um, and really just kind of embracing every stage because they go by so fast. And before you know it, they're 15 or
Yeah,
31.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. Before we finish, is there anything that we didn't talk about that you really wish we had of?
I mean, I think I know that kind of the focus was supposed to be about boys, and we kind of strayed from that a little bit. And I think that, and kind of what you were saying about the involuntary bias one would have about a taller kid versus a shorter kid. I think in our society we put definitely different genders in different buckets, and I think that it is really important to kind of lean into all different aspects of your child, regardless if they're a girl or a boy. And it's I think it's sometimes difficult to get over that own internal bias that you have that I shouldn't talk, like I would never think to talk about hair with my son, yet he's now 11 and all into doing his hair, right?
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
he asked me to buy the special hair powder that I bought for him last year and then he didn't use, so I returned it. And then he got all upset that I returned it. And I was like, but you didn't use it. And I was getting to the 30 days and I wanted my money back because it was expensive. And, my daughter talks about her hair and does her hair and hair, that I never would have thought it would be that important to my son. So I feel like just kind of not pigeonholing them into the gender that they are and kind of just seeing them for who they are and what's important to them, regardless of if they're a girl or a boy. And just kind of leaning into that. Like he's all into doing his hair now because he's all into his looks. And so I said to him, I think it's time we start having a conversation about moisturizer. And he started laughing. And I was like, but what? But that was when
Mm.
my daughter hit this age. I was like, all right, we're going to take you to the dermatologist. Let's start talking about your skin. And I was like, wait a second, I have to do that for him. And so, I bought him the starter moisturizer that she had. And I said to him, I'm noticing some dry patches. Your skin is changing. You need to start moisturizing. Let's talk about moisturizing. And, it kind of was fun for me because
Mm.
I guess it took me thinking that I needed to talk to him about it. Whereas with my daughter, it was kind of a little bit more natural to have that conversation with her. Um, but also I think that we talk about like girl drama and put such emphasis on the drama that girls go through. And maybe don't think that boys go through that as much too. And my son had this bizarre situation this year in his friend group that was really just kind of unexpected, and he handled it like beyond a champion, and I was so proud of him. And I think that he is that like perfect combination of sugar and spice that he drives me absolutely bonkers, but then he'll do something and I'll be like, you're the most incredible human being to ever walk the face of the earth. And like sometimes he says things and we're like, what? And he's like, what? I was listening. And we were like, what? And just kind of I feel like I expect that from my daughter. I don't always expect that from him. I feel like I hold him unfairly at a different level, which is my
But
own, again, personal bias. Yeah.
that's what I was going to say. That's when parents can kind of look at their own um, unconscious biases
Yeah.
and how that's impacting how they're parenting. If a parent recognizes that it's possible, that's there, and then
Yeah.
starts digging in, it will make all the difference. Because if you
Yeah.
don't, then you assume you're a woman, you can understand what your daughter needs, and
Mm-hmm.
as a woman, you think that you understand what the boy needs. But if you
Yep.
don't remove some of that bias, you're missing the mark. So good for
Yeah.
you.
Thank you. I think the other thing is, and I think this is kind of with all kids, but maybe more with boys because they're not as verbal, blah, 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 as girls are. I think sometimes when my son acts out, I know that there's like more behind it. So, like the other
Absolutely.
day, right? And I think that the other day he was acting out and I was like, there's something else going on. And he's like, no, there's not. And I just kept saying it until he like broke and then was like, this is what happened. And I'm like, I knew that. And I think that that's one of those things that, like, again, it goes back to communication. It goes back to the more you talk to your kid, you know them. It talks about, and I don't want to talk about like poker cues, it's not like he goes like that or something, but it's the look in their eye or the turn of their face or just, the way that they talk about something or a word that they use. And you're like, I've heard this word before. But, he was upset about something the other day. And then he kept telling me that nothing happened until I finally dug into it to get something to happen. Or, he's had situations in school where, and this hasn't happened that often, but like kids have said things to him that have been like triggering about something and he'll go off the hook. And then, if he goes to talk to whatever teacher is the one that's, handling it, I'll say like, well, did you say blah, blah, blah? That makes them understand why the child saying this to you would trigger you. And he's like, no. And I'm like, well, it's very important. And that's something also I think that I'm trying to teach my kids, first of all, how to speak to an adult, and also that you have to be an advocate for yourself. You don't get anything unless you ask for it. And you have to be like the person giving the details so somebody understands. I say, so you asked me what the title of my book. Here's a better one instead, or my movie, instead of Gravity Always Wins. You're a puzzle piece. I always say to them, you're a puzzle. Every part of you is a puzzle piece. And every time someone sees one of your puzzle pieces, they look at the bigger picture and what that puzzle looks like. So I say, if you're a jerk, someone's going to think that you're a jerk puzzle piece and the whole puzzle together looks like maybe you're a jerk. And if you're really kind, that's a puzzle piece. And people put together all these pieces to get like the picture of you. Um, and so, like, I'll say to them sometimes, like, is that a puzzle piece that you want someone to see? And they'll be like, no. And I'm like, all right, well, then, maybe you shouldn't have done that. But I think just that, really getting down to the nitty gritty of why kids do things sometimes is so important. And just knowing that it's not always what it seems.
I think
Um,
especially with boys, it
yes,
almost always is not
yes,
what you're seeing. And with the misbehavior is often kind of a cry for help.
yep,
And underneath all of, I would say all misbehavior is some emotional or physical unmet need. And
yep,
so if you respond to just the behavior, you're missing the mark completely. And
yep.
if you can really get curious and like really dig deep, you will possibly get to what is behind that misbehavior. And then, then your kid has a real good chance of being able to move forward because you've gotten to the root of it.
Yeah, and something that I don't know if I heard this or I made it up as like an amalgamation of a bunch of different things, but when they were little, I used to always say, like, I feel like, and have been home with them, lucky enough, with my flexibility to be home with them and raising them. We never had help. And obviously you become a PhD in your own kid. And there would be like little, this is like little, but there would be like little times where I would, they would have a tantrum or they would have a fit. And you're on kind of that, like almost a precipice of about to lose it. And there's this moment where sometimes I would lose it. And sometimes I would say they can't control themselves. And this is like past the point of no return. And once I was able to control myself and stop myself from screaming that they were screaming or fighting with them, I started doing this thing where, and again, I can't credit it to anyone because I don't remember if anyone actually taught me this or if just I put it together with a bunch of different things. But I would say to them, "Are you out of control?" And they would nod because I would always be like, "Oh my God, they're out of control." I need to ask them if they're out of control. They would say yes, absolutely every time. And then I would take them in my lap, and I would just like pet their head and say, "You're safe, you're safe, you're safe. I love you, you're safe." And they would, go from nuts and crazy to completely de-escalated. And
that's beautiful, actually. That's beautiful. And there's a phrase that goes with that I've heard, and same thing. Don't know where it came from, but I use it. But it's connect before you redirect.
I like that. Yes, I've heard that too. I like that.
Yeah, I love that. And that's a golden gem, I'd say.
Yeah, and I think I think that what I was talking about before is just the evolution of that, right? Because some kids, that might have been something that they did when they were pre-verbal or beginning to be verbal or just starting to be verbal but not able to control themselves, to now I think that, presents as what I just was explaining, that he, was like, nothing, 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 until I was like, I'm going to sit here and say what happened until you answer me because I know something happens.
Yeah.
And, maybe someone would have given up on the 15th time, but, on the 17th time, he came out with it. So.
Yeah, there's ways, there's communication strategies to get in there. But the biggest part of it is being curious enough to not accept the face value of what's going on and try to find out how best to support your child, basically.
And I think also making them feel safe and making them understand that you're there. And, I always say to them, if you tell me the truth the first time, you won't get in as much trouble as if you lie to me and tell me the truth the second time.
Me too.
So come clean.
Right? I use that at school too, because I still sub. And sometimes I will have a little, and it's almost always a little boy. Yeah. And he will be lying, right to my face about something. Like I've seen him do something and he's telling me, no, he didn't. And before I respond, that's what I'll say. Tell me the truth and we can get by this very easily. Lie to me and it's not going to go well. Yep. And as soon as I say that, it's like they tell me the truth. And I follow up because that's all it is. We need to have the straight communication. But I'm exactly the same way.
The other thing I do that I think is just really funny is, funny because how it ends up, I always say to him when he does something wrong, I'll be like, and now you can choose your punishment. And he'll be like, he's so much harder on himself than I am. Something happened in school a few weeks ago, and I was like, I understand why you did this, but you understand that you need to be punished. I'm going to let you choose your punishment. And he's like, I can't see my friends for 2 weeks and I don't have dessert for a month. And I'm like, okay, well, I think you could. I was like, I don't think it has to be that harsh. And he goes, I don't get to see my friends for a year. I'm like, that's the wrong direction. And my daughter's sitting there cracking. She was so mean that day. She's cracking up. She's like, you're really much harsher on yourself than she would be. Like, what are you doing? And she was like egging him on. He's sitting there crying. And I'm just like trying not to laugh because he's being so severe. But I do that almost as an exercise because I want to see if they understand how wrong their behavior was.
It is an excellent strategy. Yeah. That is an excellent strategy. Like that is one of the actually I'm just working on something now. Yeah. But that strategy of going through the process and then when you get to that point and having them decide how they are going to be held accountable if they've made like a repetitive mistake, like, okay, this is the third time you've done this. But seriously, that's one of the best things a parent can do, because if it's you saying, okay, you're
Right.
not having this, not having this, then you're just going to be the recipient of a lot of anger and frustration, and you're weakening your connection. So if you're always thinking about, are we staying more connected or less connected, then that's not a strategy that you'll use. And when you let them be part of that decision making, it helps them the next time because they remember they made a decision how to hold themselves accountable. Like, it is a really good strategy with kids. Good for
No,
you
thank you.
again. Wow.
Thank you. And the other thing I was going to say that I feel like we kind of got to when we spoke before, but not today, but I think is like something that's helpful is kind of how to manage like screen time and video game time and iPad time or whatever people want to call it. And I just was going to say that what the rule is usually in my house is they can do whatever they want before school. So they wake up at whatever time they wake up, they go downstairs, they can play their video games, they can play on their computer, they can, do whatever they want. But excuse me, once it's time to start getting ready for school, to start having breakfast and to make your day, everything's off. And then for the most part, do not come back on until the next morning. Obviously, like on the weekends, or sometimes that's like a bargaining chip where if you get this blood work done, you can go on your iPad or something like that. Not that they get blood work that often, but those are like my big guns that I pull out. I feel like that is a way to have a finite deadline. So the reason I don't like them to play video games or be on the iPad after school is because there's no like end except
Yeah.
like bedtime. Whereas in the morning, there's a hard like stop for breakfast because you have to catch the bus. Like that's an actual thing that you have to stop
Right.
doing because of this. Whereas in the afternoon, and also look, I am a work from home mom. There's always work. I work 24/7, so I don't have to work 9 to 5. I start getting caught up doing work sometimes, even though I try to separate that when the kids are home. But sometimes I'm involved in something and I say, yeah, you can go on it for 5 minutes. And then, an hour passes and I'm so in deep with whatever I'm doing that I'm zoning out and then they get away with it. But so I like that they're able to only do it in the morning because that's a hard stop. Um, and it's difficult because different families operate on their time frames differently. So some families feel like in the morning you don't get it, you can only play in the afternoon. And going back to the difference of video games we were talking about from like when I was younger versus my kids, like now it's a very collaborative thing. They have
Mhm.
Nintendo Online and PlayStation Online, so they can actually play with their friends sitting in different places, which I think is incredible. But also, it then becomes a whole scheduling thing where Bobby wants to play at 3, but I am not allowed to play in the afternoon. Um, and it always becomes like, well, then it's me saying no to them playing in the afternoon. It never comes down to their other parents not saying no to them in the morning, but I think that that's just, yet another point of contention with all of these distractions. But
Yeah, but I think you're right. And I think if you find the main point of that is finding what works for your family
yeah.
and sticking to your guns. Like, these are your family rules, and
Mhm.
do what is right for your family. Listen, I don't want to, I know I keep looking and seeing, God, I'm still, because I could talk a long
Yeah,
time to you, I
no,
know.
it's fine. I
So,
send my husband to go pick up the kids, so don't worry about it. Yeah.
well, listen, I do want to thank you. I'm very grateful, and I know how precious parents' time is, and I hope that you feel that I honored your time today. And
Absolutely.
such a pleasure to talk with you. And there were so many things, actionable things that parents can take out of this talk.
Oh, good. And I just
Uh,
want to end with one more because you made me think
yep.
of one more thing. I'm sorry. So you said grateful. So one of the things I started maybe a year ago is asking my kids at bedtime, what are 3 things they're grateful for from today? And the answers are always amazing because it ranges from like eyelashes to like a comfy bed. And I think that that's also something really important because every kid thinks that they have less than every other kid because their parents say no, or because they don't have the newest this, or they don't have the brand name sweatshirt or whatever. But I think it's so important for them to stop and just be grateful for anything. And I mean that, like I said, that answer could be tomatoes, or it could be that we went to see a Broadway show. It's so I think that's also something really important to make sure that your kid knows that even if they don't have the X, they have the Y, and there's a kid that's dreaming to have the Y.
Oh, I think that's brilliant. I wish I had known that when our son was younger. I didn't, I know about gratitude, but I think it's also really important for when a child goes to bed, especially if they've had a hard time or there's been stuff going on, it's easy to think the whole day was crap.
Mm-hmm.
And so you say you do this with your children. I do that. I've been doing it for a couple of years now.
Yeah.
Every single night, the last thing I do, what am I grateful for from today? And it just lets you end up the day on such a beautiful note. And some days it is only very, very small things that you can pick up when they've been really hard days, but there's always something. And I think taking that focus is, that's a beautiful way to go to sleep, but it really kind of trains your mind to start recognizing during the day when good things are happening.
Yeah.
Oh, good for you.
Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Stacey. It really has been a pleasure to talk with you again.
And can I tell people where they can find me?
Please do. And I will put everything in the show notes as well, but please tell them.
So you can find my blog at www.themintchipmama, and mama is mama.com, and across all social platforms at themintchipmama. And just let me know what you guys think and message me if you have anything to say about today's episode.
Perfect. I'm sure that you'll get some feedback without any doubt. And I will include everything in the show notes for people to be able to reach you. So thank you once again. It's been a pleasure.
With you. Thank you. Take care. Have a great day.
Thank you.
It's so interesting how my day is closing and your day is starting, right?
Yeah, that's one of the really powerful things of the time we're living in.
I love that.
So thank you. And thank you to all our listeners for joining on Unlocking the Parenting Code, all about boys. Don't forget to subscribe, share, and tune in next week for more conversations about raising boys. If you're a parent raising a boy in today's complex world, be sure to explore sonhoodcoaching.com. You'll discover expert guidance and support designed to help you unlock your full parenting potential. As Amelia Gambetti says, this job is too difficult and too beautiful to do alone. Together we can explore this adventure and discover the magic of raising boys.